Fog settles over the forward Air Force training range at 0217 hours, cutting visibility under 100 yards and erasing the ridgeline that should mark the approach. The downed aircraft rests somewhere beyond that collapsed slope, its fractured metal catching stray reflections from a rescue strobe that barely penetrates the mist. Capt. Avery Dalton, the designated rescue officer on scene, carries responsibility for every decision logged here. Liability sits with her because she is the last qualified authority on the ground with real-time visibility, however limited, and she is accountable for the retrieval attempt that now stands between survival and loss. Visibility falls under 100 yards. The ground is wet shale, unstable under her weight, rope gear beaded with fog, and a cracked navigation marker lodged beside an impact groove. Radio channels fracture into hiss. Engine noise from the recovery aircraft idles low, the fuel clock narrowing toward minimums that cannot support extended hover. Signal integrity drops below half. Command retains abort authority, and their guidance moves through a degraded link that barely holds. She documents each transmission, each risk note, each shift in weather. Hostile movement is suspected along the outskirts of the range. If recovery fails, the air crew lies exposed to capture, or worse. Fuel window narrows. Downed air crew recovery, 0217 hours. Low rotor wash pushes missed sideways, revealing nothing stable in the terrain ahead. Capt. Dalton marks the final safe boundary before forward movement becomes irreversible. She takes one step closer to the threshold where the mission breaks, and the moment holds. Fog tightens under 100 yards at 0217 hours, and recovery margins narrow while Capt. Avery Dalton operates under Air Force authority. A static washed TOC monitor flickers beside a mission binder with the abort line already circled. Low rotor noise settles into the background as the fuel gauge drifts toward its minimum landing threshold. Signal links degrade in short bursts across the monitoring equipment. Signal integrity drops to the lower threshold. Subscribe plus location check. A radio clicks once into silence while command continues to hold the abort order. This briefing remains procedural and accountable, and before we proceed into the next decision point, you must stay with the mission. Subscribe now and state where you are watching from. The range holds steady under Air Force control at 0130 hours, but fog erases distance until the crash site beyond the collapsed ridgeline is no longer visible to the naked eye. Chem lights mark the blackout strip in a thin line, barely cutting through the mist. Crew members move between rope kits stacked against the perimeter and mud-spattered rescue vehicles while cold air lifts their breath in short, visible bursts. Wind pushes rotor hum across the ground in slow intervals. Visibility falls under 100 yards. Capt. Avery Dalton stands near the forward vehicle, jacket damp from the fog settling on fabric. She reviews her field notebook under a dim light, logging each deviation with a precise timestamp. Higher Air Force Command issues updates through an unstable channel. Senior officers directing her to hold posture until sensor clarity improves. She acknowledges each instruction, documents it, and relays tasking to rescue personnel without raising her voice or altering cadence. Every action is recorded, traceable, and owned in chain of command. Sensor feed fractures again. Handheld systems blink unstable frames from the tree line 3 miles north. Noise bands run across the thermal view, and intermittent data loss creates gaps she cannot reconcile. The collapsed ridgeline blocks the planned approach route completely, leaving only an improvised corridor along wet shale. Crews prepare rope systems while the ground lighting remains minimal to preserve night discipline. Mud clings to boots and vehicle tires, making traction unpredictable. The aircrew's vitals remain listed as unknown. Relay channel stays silent. Dalton checks fuel reports from the recovery aircraft loitering in a safer sector. The window remains narrow, and command reminds her that deviation authority must be justified and documented. She maintains procedural calm, ensuring each sub-team understands its assignable responsibility. No one breaks discipline, no one oversteps authority. The fog thickens in slow pulses, shrinking visual frames of reference and masking terrain shifts. Communications degrade across secondary links. Rescue medics stage equipment near the lead vehicle, performing quiet checks under dim red lights. Wet ropes, metal carabiners, and clipped harnesses carry a thin sheen of fog. Dalton keeps her posture level as she confirms role assignments. One team to manage approach hazards, one team to support her at the ridgeline barrier. She tracks each name against her notebook, marking readiness status. The operational picture remains incomplete, but movement cannot begin without documenting the state of the environment and the chain of command's intent. Signal noise increases across the forward strip. The chem lights flicker against shifting mist while the blackout strip absorbs most of the ambient glow. Dalton radios for an updated position on the silent relay team. No response registers. She notes the absence formally, adding another timestamp beside the line indicating their last known duty update. The silence compounds the uncertainty, forming the first identifiable gap in system assurance. Crew chiefs secure rope kits into the back of the vehicle, metal frames echoing softly as they lock in place. Thermal resolution drops to intermittent frames. Wind buffets a handheld mic as Dalton briefs her senior enlisted lead. She outlines the constraints: restricted terrain, degraded communication, unstable sensor feeds, and limited fuel support if immediate extraction becomes necessary. Every factor is logged. Every risk is recorded. Her tone remains calm, intentional, and rooted in standard rescue protocol. The fog rises and sinks over the perimeter in irregular movements, further complicating estimates. Visibility contraction accelerates. Dalton steps along the strip edge, checking the anchoring points for the improvised route. Cracked navigation markers lie half buried in wet ground, remnants from earlier training runs. She taps one with her boot, confirming instability. The terrain will not offer predictable footing. Rescue personnel adjust their harnesses and wait for her direction. She must choose the timing, the order of movement, and the risk acceptance notation. Sensor alignment fails at the upper band. She speaks the operational truth aloud once. Visibility, near zero. Communications degraded. The phrase anchors the moment, a recognition that the environment and supporting systems are no longer reliable. She looks toward the collapsed ridgeline where the air crew remains cut off, fully aware that each delay reduces their survivability window. The mission cannot proceed without acknowledging the deteriorating system inputs. Relay request returns no confirmation. She documents this final absence. It is the first fracture point in the operational structure, the fault line that will break in the next phase. The moment holds at its edge, 1 second before escalation begins. Fog intensifies across the forward training range at 0610 hours, pressing into every open corridor and distorting depth perception until even high-lumen flashlights fail past short distance. Capt Avery Dalton stands at the base of the mud-slick slope leading toward the collapsed ridgeline, boots sinking half an inch into unstable ground. Cold air mixes with residual rotor wash from the recovery aircraft still holding 3 miles out, its engines idling low as fuel drains toward the minimum return mark. The official sensor picture shows no hostile movement, but the fog folds in irregular patterns that indicate displacement in areas command insists are clear. Thermal return drops to intermittent. Dalton lifts a handheld thermal device and watches the screen blink red twice before stabilizing on a blurred mass of cooling shale. Data corruption shows in rolling interference lines across the lower quadrant. She documents the instability in her field notebook, stating time, conditions, and the approximate bearing where resolution breaks down. The ridgeline remains partially obscured by drifting mist, revealing fractured silhouettes of terrain only when wind cuts at the right angle. Her medics wait 10 yards behind, gear strapped down tight, flares secured but unopened due to authorization limits. Relay channel remains silent. She radios for an updated status from the forward relay team positioned along the eastern contour, but no return signal registers. She logs the attempt, repeats the call, and logs again. Silence builds another blind sector into the operational picture, one that headquarters interprets as benign rather than missing. Dalton notes the contradiction. marking the absence as a rising risk rather than a neutral data gap. The fog pulses again, collapsing visibility under 100 yards. Flashlight beams scatter back into the air instead of forward into terrain. Fuel window narrows again. Headquarters transmits a formal abort order for the recovery aircraft, citing minimum landing threshold and the need to preserve flight safety. Dalton acknowledges receipt, records the instruction verbatim, and requests deviation authority to continue the ground push toward the ridgeline. Her mission tablet displays the request, time-stamped and cross-referenced, but the response returns as a refusal due to insufficient confirmed ground detail. She screenshots the denial and attaches it to her deviation log without commentary. The wind pushes fog sideways, revealing fractured metal far up the slope where the downed aircrew remains unreachable. Sensor instability increases across upper bands. The medics advance at her signal, maintaining controlled spacing as they move toward the slope. Mud shifts beneath their weight, dragging at their footing. The cold air carries the faint metallic ping of cooling wreckage, marking the minutes since initial impact. Dalton scans the terrain with the thermal device again, watching the return stutter into partial frames. She adjusts the focus, confirms no friendly markers, and continues upward. Her voice stays level as she coordinates movement, noting each action as part of the official record. Relay channel still shows no activity. Headquarters restates that no hostile signatures appear on their sensors. Dalton listens, compares that directive to the shifting fog currents around the slope, and documents the discrepancy in her notebook. She does not challenge their interpretation. She records evidence. The medics report visibility tightening further, estimating less than 80 yards in sections where fog density peaks. Flashlights struggle to penetrate the mist, creating narrow cones of reflection rather than illumination. Thermal signatures dissolve at the ridgeline threshold. Dalton pauses near an outcrop where the terrain breaks unevenly beneath her boots. The slope angles sharply upward, wet shale giving way under weight. She braces against a rock edge and directs the medics to adjust spacing to avoid compounding a slip. Vehicles idle low in the distance, their engines pushing muffled vibrations through the ground as the recovery element waits for a revised command decision. Dalton checks the fuel report again. The aircraft remains minutes from mandatory return. Secondary link degrades without warning. The fog folds in another irregular pattern, swirling laterally across the slope rather than drifting upward. Dalton watches the disturbance carefully, noting motion inconsistency relative to natural airflow. She logs this observation, marking it as unconfirmed potential movement. Headquarters responds with the same assertion. No signatures, no threat. She records that too. Her tone stays procedural. Fuel reserve drops toward critical. She repositions the medics, rotating their formation to compensate for the blind sector caused by the silent relay. One medic scans the tree line with a handheld device, but the return shows only waves of interference. Dalton checks her mission tablet again, reviewing the refusal of deviation authority. The clipboard hanging from her vest holds the printed denial form she prepared earlier, corners damp from fog. She files a new timestamp, noting the continuing mismatch between field observations and remote sensors. Signal distortion increases across thermal layers. Wind cuts across the ridge in a sharp gust, forcing mist against the slope and masking all but the closest contour lines. Dalton adjusts her helmet light downward to reduce glare and ensure terrain visibility. The medics follow suit. She directs them to maintain contact distance of 5 yards, preventing separation in the fog. Their harnesses creak softly as metal shifts under weight. Her flare case remains strapped unopened to her vest. Authorization still pending. Relay request receives no confirmation for the third cycle. They advance another 20 yards toward the collapsed ridgeline. Loose shale rattles under their boots, sending faint echoes down the incline. Dalton stops briefly to scan the fog again. The environment reflects contradictions. No visible threat, but unmistakable irregularities in movement patterns. She records all of it. Headquarters repeats its order for the aircraft to RTB. She states acknowledgement, logs the command, and keeps moving. Two medics tighten their grips on their equipment. Thermal interference expands across both sectors. Dalton states the situational truth aloud, once within the record. Abort ordered. Ground. Truth. Unconfirmed. The words create a fixed point in the operational log. Fog swirls unpredictably around them, folding into and out of view like shifting curtains, but never clearing line of sight toward the crash site. She calculates distance again, roughly 100 yards to the first safe observation point if the terrain holds. Fuel margin reaches final tolerance. She halts the team at a narrowing in the slope, checking stability before committing further. The environment grows more volatile. Fog thickens. Sensor returns degrade. Relay silence deepens. Every supporting variable trends downward simultaneously. She documents this convergence, labeling it as risk accumulation under current orders. The medics confirm readiness to continue. Gear secured. Breathing steady in cold air. Thermal device cycles into full dropout. Dalton does not advance yet. She studies the fog, the silence, the missing relay traffic, and the narrowing fuel window. Conditions no longer align with the operational picture command relies upon. She notes this explicitly. The slope ahead remains passable, but only for a short window before the instability becomes unmanageable. Signal degradation reaches critical persistence. This is the last stable moment before the mission picture breaks under its conflicting inputs. The ground truth is about to force a shift command cannot yet see. Fog condenses against the fractured slope as Capt. Avery Dalton reaches the wreckage at 0630 hours. Visibility stays under 100 yards, shifting with every gust of wind that pushes mist across her headlamp beam. Wet shale grinds under her boots, unstable and slick, forcing careful foot placement as she closes the final distance. Rescue vehicle headlights bleed into whiteout behind her, their beams diffused into soft halos with no defined edge. The downed aircraft sits partially embedded in the slope, metal cooling in the cold air, releasing faint pings that mark the minutes slipping away. Visibility drops under 80 yards. Dalton angles her light toward a half-buried housing at the base of the debris field. The casing is cracked, steel bent inward as if crushed under falling rock. Mud coats the intake vents. A stripped relay line trails downslope, snapped clean. She kneels beside it and brushes away wet shale. Her gloves shine under the beam, slick with mist. The transceiver's status LED blinks red in uneven cadence, signaling intermittent power rather than total failure. She lifts her field recorder, states the time, the condition of the housing, and its role as the primary uplink for the relay team. Command channel opens for the first time in minutes. She keys her mic, transmitting a concise report. Relay compromised, node crushed, data flow obstructed, no confirmation of external tampering, ground truth inconsistent with remote situational picture. Her tone stays steady, procedural. Mist hits her helmet in fine droplets. The GPS device at her chest attempts to lock, blinking between red and amber as it fights for signal. Medics move behind her, sweeping debris aside and locating the first aviator pinned against a strut. The aircrew member breathes in shallow intervals. Shock evident. Dalton documents vitals immediately. Signal integrity rises as the relay connection stabilizes. A clipped chirp sounds in her headset. The node manages a partial handshake. Data pushes through in a compressed burst. Static trails the edges of the transmission, but clarity improves enough for headquarters to receive her evidence package. She uploads images of the crushed housing, the severed lines, the interference patterns captured before arrival. The body cam on her vest records her identifying each detail in neutral language: location, condition, implications for sensor corruption. Fog swirls around her, thickening at the edges of her beam. Fuel reserve improves as command reallocates assets. Headquarters responds within seconds. Tone changed, urgency now aligned with her assessment. They confirm the operational picture was based on corrupted input from the damaged relay node. Support channels reauthorize immediately. Dalton acknowledges. logs the update, and directs medics to begin stabilization procedures. Cold air cuts through their gear as they unwrap thermal blankets and apply pressure dressings. She kneels beside the second aviator, partially shielded beneath a bent section of fuselage. Vitals show rapid decline. She states these findings for the record. Visibility contracts again at the perimeter. Medics call for extraction stretchers. Dalton relays the request, now met with direct approval. Rotor wash builds faintly in the distance as assets shift position. The fog vibrates and pulses as aircraft movement stirs the air, but the visibility remains thin enough to obscure shapes beyond 30 yards. She adjusts her position to maintain footing, noting each change in terrain stability in her logbook. The cracked relay housing rests at her side, symbolic of the data fault that framed the earlier misread. GPS lock holds for 3 consecutive pings. Dalton's device stabilizes, pulsing amber, then steady green for a moment before dropping back to red. It is enough. A corrected grid pushes through to headquarters. She hears a brief confirmation tone as her data packet reaches command intact. Power shifts as the verified ground truth replaces assumptions built on corrupted relay flow. She speaks the formal statement required at this stage. Ground truth overrides. Fog of war. The words fix the moment into the operational record. Support frequency widens for medical coordination. Medics secure the first aviator onto a stretcher, moving carefully across the unstable slope. Dalton confirms their path, directing them around fractured debris that threatens to shift under load. Fog distorts depth, but her headlamp reveals the safest line of movement. She documents the transfer, noting time and condition. The second aviator requires immediate airway support. She stabilizes the neck, holds position while a medic inserts gear under dim light. Mist rolls between them, softening edges and muting color. Extraction vector clears for approach. Dalton rechecks her comms. The channel returns full functionality for the first time since initial contact loss. Headquarters provides updated flight windows, fuel tolerance, and landing restrictions. She records each instruction aloud, ensuring the accountability trail remains unbroken. Her calm tone carries through the static. 1 aviator stabilized, 1 critical, both recoverable with immediate lift. Behind her, engines idle low, their sound diffused by fog. Relay noise drops below operational threshold. She retrieves the crushed relay housing, lifting it slightly to show the field recorder the depth of impact. The internal components rattle under minimal movement. She states the likely cause: terrain shift, not external sabotage. The relay team's silence is explained by physical displacement, not failure to report. She transmits this clarification, ensuring command has the precise reason their situational picture diverged from reality. Evidence replaces uncertainty. Fog density eases along the ridge. Dalton signals the medics to initiate movement toward the extraction point. The fog parts briefly, revealing the rescue vehicle's beams cutting low across the slope. She leads the path, marking hazards, calling distances, and maintaining steady pace. Her reports continue in procedural cadence. Vitals monitored, stretcher stable, terrain clear for 10 yards. Rotor wash thickens the air as recovery assets reposition overhead. Command acknowledges the corrected operational picture. A clear tone sounds in her headset, signaling full integration of her ground data into the mission system. Headquarters states that all support channels are reauthorized and aligned with her assessment. Dalton logs the acknowledgement, stating time and conditions. The medics begin their final ascent toward the extraction corridor, stretcher angled to avoid shifting debris. Wind shifts, revealing structural damage along the fuselage. Dalton documents the final structural conditions, capturing last images for later analysis. She secures her recorder, steps to the side of the path, and ensures both aviators remain stable as they move. The fog presses close again, but no longer obscures the mission picture. Evidence has replaced uncertainty. The immediate threat is contained through coordinated action, not defiance. Data upload completes with a final confirmation tone. Dalton states the final entry for this phase: evidence transmitted, command corrected, extraction underway. With support channels restored and accountability established, authority realigns around verified truth. The mission shifts forward under accurate understanding. Ground and command operating as one again. Fog thins across the forward strip as extraction begins in steady sequence. Cold air carries the faint vibration of engines idling at low power. Capt. Avery Dalton stands beside the medics as they position the first stretcher. Her field notebook open to the deviation entry she signed at 0640 hours. Nothing in her posture signals defiance. Each action reflects the duty to record, verify, and protect when the operational picture fractures. Perimeter visibility improves by 20 yards. The corrected sitrep reaches her radio with a soft acknowledgement tone. It folds neatly into the chain of command. Headquarters accepts the evidence she transmitted, confirms the earlier misread, and aligns all supporting elements to her updated ground truth. Medics lift the second aircrew member into place, rescue gear clattering against the metal frame as fog drifts around their silhouettes. The extraction vehicle waits 10 yards downslope. Doors open. Interior lights muted. Corrected sitrep confirms her earlier report. Dalton closes her field notebook and secures it in her vest. The fog continues to thin, revealing the faint perimeter lights of the forward strip in a dim arc across the distance. The aircrew stabilize under continuous monitoring. Her direction remains calm, procedural. No raised voice. No urgency beyond what the facts demand. Everything she does reinforces the principle that accuracy, not assumption, governs survival. Medical handoff time drops to under 2 minutes. She signals the team to begin final loading. The extraction vehicle doors close with a firm seal, marking the transition from field stabilization to transport. Engines rumble in synchronized cadence as the vehicle prepares to move toward the lit corridor, now visible through dispersing mist. The earlier uncertainty has been replaced by documented clarity, each step logged, each deviation accounted for in the record. Duty is accountability. Dalton's final check is deliberate. Personnel accounted for. Evidence secured. Command aligned with verified truth. The fog lifts enough to show the path forward, and the mission continues under the authority of documented fact. Her role is unchanged and reaffirmed. She fulfills it without flourish, without hesitation, and without compromise, because accountability is the foundation that keeps every survivor alive. Fog continues to roll back across the forward strip as extraction lights scatter through damp air. Engines idle at low power while personnel secure both rescued aircrew. Capt. Avery Dalton stands near the clipboard containing the final signatures on the recovery handoff. Her gear coated with a thin sheen of moisture reflecting the headlights. The mission now holds steady, but the ethical question remains unresolved. Extraction convoy stabilizes perimeter control. Headquarters issued an abort based on remote assumptions. Dalton confirmed survivors through verified ground truth. The chain of command dilemma sits here. Follow a distant picture that says impossible, or act on accountable evidence gathered within 100 yards of the crash. Visibility improves by 30 yards. Medics complete another quick check. Both aviators remain critical but stable enough for movement. The low drone hum along the strip begins to taper into quiet as the convoy prepares to roll. Final medical assessment confirms both survivors remain critical. What would you have done? Now choose. Follow the abort order as written, or act on verified ground truth to force the system to respond. State your decision in the comments. Perimeter lights along the forward strip dim as recovery personnel finish loading both rescued aircrew into the transport vehicle. Engines cool in the background, moisture settling in the air as operations draw down. A soft rotor fade out gives way to a clean radio tone, marking the close of movement at this hour. Capt. Avery Dalton walks the strip alone, reviewing her report log and finalizing entries for higher headquarters. Next mission incoming. The forward strip settles into quiet, and the last vehicle eases toward the perimeter gate. Dalton confirms her documentation, ensuring every deviation and correction is captured in the record. Next operation receives preliminary tasking. Night closes over the range, and accountability remains the through line from first contact to final signature. Stay with the work that tells these missions in full. Like this briefing, subscribe to the channel, and prepare for the next mission already waiting.